He told his friend I shouldn't have been born. I had just walked in excited to share I got promoted. But this isn't a story about pain, it's what happened when I chose silence over blood. Marley Prescott was 31 years old, single, and owned a 4-bedroom colonial in the suburbs of Chicago that gleamed in the listings with its wraparound porch and custom cabinetry. It had cost her $830,000 and most of her 20s. Her name alone was on the deed, but her parents had called it home for the past 3 years. Every morning Marley rose at 5 for a workout in the basement gym she'd installed herself. Then a protein smoothie, a cold shower, and she was out the door by 7:15 to make it to her downtown office at Barrett Hartman Financial. She was a rising star, 3 promotions in 5 years, an MBA from Northwestern, a client list worth tens of millions. Her colleagues admired her. Her boss mentored her. People said she was going places, but no one ever asked her if she was tired. And Marley was tired. Not just of the 70-hour workweeks or the perpetual hustle that defined her success, but of coming home every night to the quiet resentment of her parents. Of walking through her own front door and feeling like a stranger. She paid the mortgage. She paid the groceries, the utilities, the cell phone bills, the streaming services, the car insurance for vehicles she didn't drive. She paid for the HVAC replacement last winter and the $4,200 roof repair the year before that. Her parents, Raymond and Carol Prescott, contributed nothing. Just until we get back on our feet, her mom had said 3 years ago when they moved in after her father's second construction business went under. But they were still there. And Marley was still paying. Still, she never complained. Not out loud. Because Marley had been raised to believe that good daughters did not question, did not resent, did not draw boundaries. Good daughters gave. They gave time, money, energy, forgiveness. And Marley had always been the good daughter. Her younger sister Layla, on the other hand, had dropped out of community college at 21 to marry her high school sweetheart Nate and now had 3 kids under the age of 10. Their home was chaotic and messy and noisy, and the pride of their parents' hearts. Every Wednesday, Layla brought the kids over for family dinner, and Raymond would beam and say, "There's our girl," as he scooped up little Miles into his arms. Carol would ask to see new photos of Layla's baby Harper or compliment her on the lasagna she'd picked up from Costco. They rarely asked Marley how her week had been. If they did, it was in passing and usually followed by something about Layla's latest parenting triumph or Nate's promotion. Marley told herself it didn't matter, that she didn't need applause or affection. She had built this house, hadn't she? She had created this life. She could endure a little imbalance, but it did matter. She felt it in the quiet moments sitting alone at the dinner table after everyone else had gone to bed, nursing a glass of wine and reading client emails to fill the silence. She felt it when her mother borrowed her jewelry without asking, or when her father rolled his eyes at her fancy job but still took the car she leased him in for free maintenance. She felt it when she looked at old photo albums and saw Layla's birthday parties decorated with helium balloons and sheet cakes while her own featured a single candle in a cupcake and her mother sighing in the background. She felt it most of all in the way they looked at her as if she were a bank with arms. Useful, dependable. Not particularly lovable. Sometimes when she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan turn in lazy circles, Marley would whisper the question to herself that she never dared ask aloud. Would they still care about me if I stopped paying for everything? And the answer, terrifying in its clarity, was probably not. Cassie, her best friend since college, had once asked her why she put up with it all. "Marley, they're adults," she'd said during one of their rare lunch dates. "They should be taking care of themselves. You're not responsible for their entire existence. They're my parents," Marley had replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "What am I supposed to do, throw them out?" "Yes," Cassie had said flatly. "Or at least stop bankrupting yourself emotionally to earn their love. Because newsflash, you're never going to get it. Not the way you want." Marley hadn't responded. She'd simply stirred her soup and nodded politely. It was easier to stay quiet. To maintain the image. The loyal daughter. The dependable one. The one who always showed up no matter how empty she felt inside. She remembered once years ago coming home from college for Thanksgiving. Layla had just announced her engagement, and their parents had thrown a huge dinner to celebrate string lights, table runners, the works. When Marley arrived with a 4.0 GPA and a fellowship offer, her father had patted her shoulder and said, "Good for you, kid," before turning to Layla and asking about the flower arrangements. That was the night she first understood her achievements would never mean as much to them as Layla's ordinary milestones. A child. A wedding. A family. They wanted a daughter who stayed close to home, who cooked casseroles, who called her mother every day. They got Marley instead. Ambitious, distant, unapologetically independent. So Marley tried harder. She paid more. She showed up, cleaned up, picked up the pieces. She became the scaffolding that held the family up, hoping somewhere deep down that one day they would notice. That one day they'd say thank you. That one day they'd love her in a way that wasn't transactional. But that day had never come. And Marley was starting to wonder if it ever would. Because family, she was beginning to realize, can be the heaviest burden of all, especially when love comes with conditions. It was the kind of day Marley should have remembered forever, the kind that sealed years of grind and discipline into a single shimmering triumph. The sky had been unusually clear for a Chicago March morning, and sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the Barrett-Hartman boardroom like a blessing. Marley stood at the head of the long walnut table, her blazer sharp, her voice steady as she walked a panel of prospective clients through a retirement portfolio worth tens of millions. Her slide transitions were flawless. Her analysis was airtight. Her confidence radiated. When it ended, there was a moment of silence, then nods. Smiles. A handshake from the CEO himself. "You've clearly done your homework, miss," Prescott said, and Marley caught her boss Victoria's approving glance across the room. "You nailed it," Victoria whispered later. "Take the rest of the day off, you deserve it." And for the first time in a long while, Marley felt proud enough to want to share it. Not with clients or colleagues, but with her family. She could already imagine it, walking through the front door with a bottle of sparkling cider, calling her parents into the kitchen and announcing the news. Her father maybe would finally look at her like she mattered. Her mother might smile, even hug her. They'd ask questions. Maybe they'd even suggest dinner, just the three of them, like when she was younger. For once, she let herself want that moment. It was 2:30 p.m., early enough to surprise them. She pulled into the driveway, both their cars parked outside, which was unusual. Her mom usually had a book club on Wednesdays. Maybe the stars had aligned. Maybe this was fate. She let herself in quietly through the side door, holding her heels in one hand and her purse in the other. The house was still. No clattering dishes, no television. Then she heard her father's voice. He was in his bedroom, the one he'd converted into a home office, but mostly used to watch golf and complain about the news. She was about to call out when she froze. "Still living with her," he was saying. "What choice do we have? The market's insane." A familiar voice answered, Stan, his old business partner. "She must be doing well, though, right, Marley? Fancy job and all." Her father scoffed. "Please. She's nothing. A failure, really. She should have never been born." The words hit her like a blow to the chest. She didn't move. Didn't breathe. Her heart pounded in her ears. "Sure, she makes good money," he continued, his voice soaked in disdain. "But what kind of life is that? 31, still single, no kids. Married to her job. She walks around like she's better than us just because she pays the bills." Marley felt the hallway spin around her. Her fingers gripped the stair rail, her knuckles white. "She's letting us live there like we should be grateful," he laughed. "Honestly, it's embarrassing. When people ask what I do, I have to admit my daughter supports me. I've got no dignity left." "Your other daughter doing okay?" Stan asked, and Marley didn't have to see his father's face to know it had changed. "She's my real achievement," he said, pride softening his voice. "Layla's got 3 beautiful kids, a solid marriage. Sure, she didn't finish school, but she's got what matters. A family, love." Then her mother's voice joined in. "Who are you talking to, Ray? Just Stan?" "We were talking about the girls." "Did you tell him about Marley's promotion?" her mother asked. "What's there to tell?" he replied, scoffing again. "Another rung on the ladder. Big deal. Sometimes I wonder where we went wrong with her," her mother sighed. "So cold, So obsessed with money and status. Not like Layla. They both laughed, quiet, complicit. She needs us more than we need her, her mom continued. Without us, who does she have? No husband, no kids. Just that pushy friend of hers, Cassie, filling her head with ideas. The hallway narrowed. The air thickened. Marley backed away, shoes still in hand, heart shattered into something raw and unfamiliar. Somehow she made it out to her car, sliding into the driver's seat as her hands trembled too hard to start the engine. She sat there for what felt like hours, replaying their words in her head. Not just the cruelty, but the certainty in their voices. This wasn't frustration spoken in anger. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was truth. It was what they really believed, said when they thought she wasn't listening. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't come from enemies. It comes from people you've bled for, sacrificed for, stayed late at work, and stayed silent at dinner for. She thought of every mortgage payment, every grocery run, every Christmas gift she'd picked out with care and signed from Marley and love. All of it dismissed as tasteless, transactional, unnecessary. They had never wanted her, not really. They'd wanted what she could provide. A roof, a wallet, a buffer between their irresponsibility and reality. She started the car, drove without direction. She wasn't sure where she was going, only that she couldn't be there anymore. She ended up at Cassie's apartment, mascara streaked down her cheeks, her blazer still crisp, but her spirit collapsed. When Cassie opened the door and saw her face, she didn't ask what happened. She just pulled Marley inside and locked the door behind her. Later, when Marley told her what she'd overheard, Cassie's expression went rigid. "You're not going back there," she said. "Not tonight. Maybe not ever." Marley nodded, voice hollow. "I don't think I can look them in the eye again." That night Marley lay awake on Cassie's pull-out couch, the city's hum buzzing beyond the window. She stared at the ceiling and felt something inside her begin to shift, not break exactly, but unhook. The need for approval. The ache for recognition. The relentless trying. Gone. All that remained was a cold, clear stillness. She had heard the truth. And once you hear the truth behind your back, you don't return to being the person you were before. You either shatter, or you start to build something new. And Marley was done shattering. Cassie's guest room was small and sunless, tucked behind a hallway filled with forgotten laundry and art prints in cheap frames. But to Marley it felt like sanctuary. She hadn't planned on staying long, just a night, maybe two. Enough time to stop shaking. Enough time to believe that what she'd overheard hadn't dismantled her entirely. But one night became 3. Then a week. And during that week, something remarkable happened. Nothing. No guilt trips. No snide comments about overworking. No subtle sighs when she stayed silent at dinner. No being spoken over. No reminders that she was too much. Just stillness. And the gentle clink of Cassie's French press in the morning. "You're breathing differently," Cassie said one afternoon as they sipped coffee on the fire escape. "I am. You don't sound like you're bracing for impact anymore." Marley blinked. She hadn't even realized she was. She hadn't realized how much of her life was spent in tension and tiptoe, in the constant calculus of being acceptable to people who would never say you're enough. Something cracked open in her then, not broken but exposed. Fragile. Honest. "I'm selling the house," she said, suddenly surprising even herself. Cassie didn't flinch, just nodded once. "Good, I haven't told them. They have no idea I'm gone for more than a night." "You don't owe them anything, Marley." That night Marley opened a blank spreadsheet on her laptop. She titled it Exit. Columns bloomed across the screen: steps, costs, legal, emotional. She color-coded them like she did for her clients: green for logistics, yellow for risks, red for things that might break her. By midnight, she had a list of professionals to call: real estate agent, financial advisor, lawyer. By morning she had appointments scheduled. Her first was with Dr. Elise Rowan, a therapist Cassie had referred with the kind of hush usually reserved for surgeons and saints. "She won't fix you," Cassie had said. "But she'll help you remember you don't need to be fixed." The waiting room was warm, cluttered with plants and magazines that hadn't been curated to impress. Marley sat stiffly on the leather couch, her hands in her lap, unsure where to begin when her name was called. But Dr. Rowan didn't rush her. She simply sat across from her in a chair that looked like it had stories in its cushions and said, "You can start anywhere." And so Marley did. At first it was facts, chronology, timelines, mortgage payments, the overheard conversation. She spoke in numbers and events as if reciting a case file. But eventually her voice cracked. And then for the first time in her adult life she cried for herself. Not because she'd failed, but because she hadn't, and it still hadn't been enough. "I spent my whole life trying to be something they'd be proud of," she whispered. "But the only thing they ever seemed to love was my usefulness." Dr. Rowan nodded gently. "That's a profound grief, Marley. Not losing what you had, but realizing what you never did." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full. A sacred pause. "I want to stop trying," Marley said. "I don't want revenge. I just want freedom." "Then let's talk about what freedom looks like for you." Freedom looked like Denver. It was a city Marley had only visited once years ago on a work trip. She remembered mountains like murals, air that tasted cleaner, people who smiled like it cost nothing. She'd never given herself permission to consider living there before. But now it felt like possibility. She called her financial advisor next. Trevor Michaels had managed her portfolio for years, and when she told him her plan, he didn't flinch. "You're in an excellent position to relocate," he said, eyes scanning her investments. "We can liquidate some assets without penalty, and the housing market is in your favor." Next came the real estate agent, Natalie Wells. Sharp. Efficient. No nonsense. When Marley explained the situation, Natalie just raised an eyebrow. "Your parents, are they co-owners?" "No," Marley replied. "The house is mine, all mine." "Then we move quietly," Natalie said. "I'll arrange a discreet appraisal and stage the house for a quick sale. You'll need them out during open house hours. Can that be arranged?" "I'll figure it out." And she would. Because Marley had never been more sure of anything in her life. That weekend she returned to the house while her parents were out. She packed methodically: birth certificate, passport, jewelry, photos. Her high school yearbook still had a sticky note from Layla inside. "You're going to be huge someday. Just don't forget us." She placed the book in the keep pile anyway. In the guest room closet, she found a ceramic mug she'd made in middle school, crooked, brightly painted, and chipped at the lip. She remembered giving it to her father for Father's Day. It had been stuffed behind a broken flashlight and a stack of old magazines. She left it there. She met with the lawyer on Monday, Patricia Alvarez, recommended by a colleague. "You are well within your rights to sell," Patricia confirmed. "But you should prepare emotionally for the fallout." "I'm not afraid of their reaction," Marley said, and she meant it. "I'm afraid I'll second-guess myself." "Then put it in writing," Patricia said. "When doubt comes, read the truth again." So she did. She wrote down everything. The conversation she overheard, the expenses she'd covered, the things they'd taken for granted. She printed it out, folded it, and tucked it into her journal. Her truth, black and white. Undeniable. The for sale sign went up a week later quietly while her parents were at brunch. Natalie texted her a photo of it in the front yard under the elm tree Marley had planted 3 years ago. For sale. Luxury, colonial, motivated seller. Marley stared at the image for a long time. She didn't feel triumphant, she felt clean, and in that stillness she realized this was her power. Not the money. Not the degrees. Not the house. But her choice. To walk away. Not to punish. Not to prove. But to protect. Herself. And that was more than revenge, it was revolution. The house was quiet when Marley returned on a Thursday afternoon. Her parents were out, likely at one of the midweek church luncheons. Her mother never missed, where casseroles and gossip were served in equal measure. She walked through the front door without hesitation. She no longer flinched at the sound of the floorboards or paused at the threshold as if asking permission. This was still her house on paper, and now in purpose. She wasn't there to fight. She wasn't even there to speak. She came for the boxes. The ones she had stored in the guest room closet, labeled with fading Sharpie, old stuff, college, and Marley Keep. Things she'd brought from every apartment, every temporary home before she bought this one. Things she hadn't looked at in years. She sat cross-legged on the floor, pulling them open one by one. A shoebox held birthday cards her parents had given her through the years. The words inside were all generic, signed with love, but rarely personalized. Most of them were unopened. She hadn't remembered that until now. A faded friendship bracelet she had made in 4th grade for her mother, still in the Ziploc bag she had handed it over and untouched. And then a spiral notebook with blue cats on the cover. Her name in loopy cursive across the front, property of Marley Rose. She hadn't seen it in decades. She flipped it open, not expecting much. But inside were her journals from age 10 through 13, pages full of simple moments, teachers she liked, books she loved, the way it felt to win the spelling bee in 5th grade. And scattered throughout, quiet heartbreaks. Small. Easily missed. But they accumulated like pebbles in a shoe. The 12th of March. I got straight. As on my report card today. Dad said. That's what I expect, and didn't look up from the television. The 5th of June, Layla got a new phone for finishing 8th grade. I got a good job text. Mom said don't expect gifts for doing what you're supposed to do. The 25th of December, I gave Mom and Dad the photo frame I made in art class. They said it was cute and left it on the counter. It's still there. Layla got a necklace and everyone made a big deal about it. Tears blurred her vision, but she kept reading. Because it wasn't just sadness she felt, it was clarity. She hadn't been abused. But she hadn't been loved either. At least not in the way that nourishes a child's soul. She had been managed, maintained, rewarded for performance, not personhood. They clothed her, fed her, drove her to school. But when she looked back, what echoed wasn't laughter or warmth. It was absence. It was silence when she needed celebration. Dismissal when she sought validation. A part of her had always believed she was imagining it. That her parents were just stoic, that Layla needed more attention, that she was the strong one and didn't require the same softness. But sitting among the artifacts of her girlhood, she saw it plainly. She had been emotionally neglected. And that, she realized with a gut punch of understanding, was why she worked so hard. Not for ambition. For approval. That kind of love, conditional, elusive, made you chase it harder. Made you work until your bones ached just for someone to finally say, you matter, you are seen, but it never came. Because it was never about her not being enough. It was about them not knowing how to love someone who didn't make them feel needed or superior. She wiped her cheeks with the sleeve of her sweatshirt and reached into the final box. Inside was the mug. The one she had made for Father's Day when she was 12, painted cobalt blue with gold letters that spelled out number 1 DAD, crooked and smudged. She had spent hours on it in art class, hoping he'd use it on his desk. Instead, it was here. Dusty. Forgotten. Stuffed under a tangle of old extension cords. She set it aside, not in the keep pile, in the let go pile. As she continued sorting, she found an old camcorder tape labeled Layla's Dance Recital, 2004. She'd been there that night Marley had skipped debate finals to attend. She remembered clapping, taking photos, holding flowers. She didn't remember anyone doing that for her, because no one had. That was the worst part of emotional neglect. It didn't scream, it didn't bruise, it simply whispered into your skin that you were invisible until you started to believe it. She pressed her back against the wall and let her eyes drift shut. This was why it hurt so much when her father called her a failure. Because she'd built her whole life trying to disprove that very idea. She'd believed if she just did enough, earned enough, achieved enough, she could rewrite the story. But you can't outwork rejection. You can only walk away from it. And that was what she was doing now. She wasn't running, she wasn't hiding, she was choosing. To stop trying to earn what should have been freely given. To stop shrinking herself to fit a family that never made space for her. To stop hoarding memories that only ever reminded her of her absence. She gathered the few things she wanted to take: her old journal, a couple of books, a drawing Layla had made of the two of them holding hands. Then she closed the boxes and labeled them clearly. Don it, trash keep. She didn't need everything, just the truth. And the space to make something new. The cafe smelled like toasted bread and vanilla, but Marley barely registered it. She had chosen this place deliberately, a neutral space where neither of them had any memories. A blank page, if that was even possible anymore. She arrived early as always. Control was her comfort zone. Today, though, nothing felt in her control, especially not the ache in her chest, the way it tightened every time she thought of her sister. Layla breezed in 5 minutes late, cheeks pink from the cold still tugging her coat collar into place. "Sorry the twins wouldn't let go of my legs," she said, laughing lightly. Keith had to peel them off. Marley nodded, lips curved into a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's fine." They ordered drinks and sat by the window. Silence crept in. Layla fiddled with her cup lid. Marley stared at the snowflakes melting on the glass. "I'm selling the house," Marley said softly but clearly. Layla blinked. "What?" "The house," she repeated. "I've put it on the market, but Mom and Dad live there," Layla said, her brows drawing together. "You love that place." "I did," Marley said. "But I don't love what it's become." Layla leaned forward, clearly confused. "Are you okay?" "I wasn't. For a long time," Marley replied. "But I'm getting there. This is part of it." Another silence. Not heavy, just unfamiliar. "I've been paying everything," Marley added. "For 3 years. Mortgage, groceries, utilities. Their cell phones. Their insurance. Everything." Layla's eyes widened. "Wait, all of it?" Marley nodded. "All of it. I thought they were just tight on money. I had no idea it was all you." "I know," Marley said. Then more gently, "That's kind of the problem." She reached into her bag and slid a folded sheet across the table. Layla hesitated before unfolding it, scanning the neatly itemized list. Her breath caught. "You've been putting $500 a month into college accounts for the kids for 5 years. They told me it was Uncle Gerald's inheritance." Marley gave a soft, hollow laugh. "They needed you to believe they were still the providers. That I was just the successful distant one who didn't need anyone." Layla looked stunned. "Why didn't you tell me I didn't need credit?" Marley said. "But I hoped they'd at least be kind." Layla frowned. "What do you mean?" "I overheard a call 3 weeks ago. Dad didn't hang up properly. I was in the hallway. He called me a failure. Said I should never have been born." Layla's mouth dropped open. "He said you were their real achievement. That I'm just a paycheck with a name." "No." Layla whispered, shaking her head slowly. "No, Marley, that can't be." He said it. And Mom agreed. Said she was tired of pretending to care about my life. That the only good thing about living with me is how much money they've saved." Layla covered her mouth. "Oh my God." Marley let the silence settle. Not to make her sister feel guilt, but so that the truth had space to breathe. "I thought you didn't want to be close," Layla said after a while. "I thought you preferred to be on your own." "I got used to being alone," Marley replied. "It wasn't a choice, it was survival. I always felt like I got the better version of them," Layla murmured. "The hugs. The praise. I thought it was because I needed more support. I didn't realize they were starving you of it." "You didn't know," Marley said. "But that doesn't mean it didn't shape me." Layla looked down. "And I never asked. I just assumed." "You weren't supposed to ask," Marley said. "They set it up that way. Kept us from comparing notes." "Why would they do that?" Marley stirred her drink, watching the foam swirl. "Because it kept them in control. It kept you loyal and me invisible." Layla sat back stunned. "I thought I was the one struggling, dropping out of school, scraping by, raising kids. I never imagined you felt unseen." "I succeeded," Marley said, "but not because they lifted me. I became strong because I had no choice. And even then, it wasn't enough for them." They both sat in silence, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was shared. Understood. Grieved. "I'm sorry," Layla said, voice breaking. "For never asking. For letting you carry all of that without knowing." "I'm not telling you to make you feel bad," Marley said. "I just needed you to finally see me." "I do," Layla said. "And I want us to fix this." Marley nodded slowly. "I'm moving to Denver. It's not just about them, it's about me. About finally living for myself." "Does that mean we won't see you anymore?" "It means I'm not going to be the family's silent pillar anymore. But I want you in my life. On our own terms." Layla reached across the table and touched her hand. "I want that too." Marley looked at her sister, truly looked at her. Not as the favored daughter, not as the person who got all the love she craved, but as someone who had been shaped by the same flawed hands. Differently, but deeply. "We don't have to pick sides," Marley said. "We can just pick each other." Layla's smile trembled. "Yeah, that's all I've ever wanted." Outside, the snow kept falling, steady, silent, beautiful in its indifference, but inside the cafe something shifted. Not a full reconciliation. Not yet, but a beginning. And sometimes that's enough. The afternoon light filtered through the living room curtains, casting long golden shadows over the furniture Marley once chose with care. The house still smelled faintly of lemon polish and her mother's lavender detergent, but it no longer smelled like home. Marley stood by the doorway for a moment longer than necessary, her hand tightening around the folder she'd carried like armor. She hadn't been back since the decision, not since she'd heard the words that cracked something in her that might never fully mend. And yet she was calm. Not because it didn't hurt, but because she had finally decided to stop bleeding for people who never noticed the wounds. Her parents sat on the couch like they had been summoned to a tribunal. Raymond's jaw was locked tight, his back as straight as ever, like posture could preserve pride. Ellen clutched a tissue in one hand and a mug in the other, as if sorrow and comfort could be performed at once. "You're really selling the house?" Ellen asked first, her voice trembling just enough to seem sincere. "No," Marley said. "I've already sold it, the paperwork's done. We close in 3 weeks." Raymond's eyes narrowed. "Without a word to us, after all we've done." Marley stepped into the room and laid the folder on the coffee table with quiet finality. "You mean the house I bought? The one I've paid every mortgage, every electric bill, every grocery run, every doctor's visit for that house?" "It's not about the money," Ellen whispered. "No," Marley said, her voice quiet but sharp. "It never was. That's why this isn't about money either." Raymond's face was turning red. "So, what then? You want revenge?" Marley flipped open the folder. Neatly printed spreadsheets, bank statements, and itemized expenses formed a thick, painful ledger. "Number, I want acknowledgement. But since I won't get that, I'll take my freedom." She began to read, her voice steady and precise. "Mortgage payments, $137, $400. Utilities, $14, $800. Household expenses, $27,000. Cell phone bills. Car insurance. Emergency dental work. Dad's truck. The vacation to Florida you insisted you paid for. $4,500 for Layla's kids' tuition." Ellen gasped. "We told her." "You told her it was a family friend helping out," Marley interrupted. "I was that friend. Quiet. Invisible. Disposable." Raymond slapped the table. "You act like we never gave you anything." "You gave me life," Marley said, her eyes meeting his. "But after that you only gave guilt." The silence was suffocating. "You said I should never have been born." Raymond blinked. "What, 3 weeks ago? I came home early from work. I wanted to share the news of my promotion." Her voice cracked just for a moment. "I walked in and heard you on a call. You were talking to Stan. You didn't know you hadn't hung up properly." Raymond looked away, shame trying to escape behind indifference. "You said I was pathetic, that my life meant nothing because I wasn't married. You said Layla was your real achievement." Ellen opened her mouth, but Marley held up a hand. "You called the Christmas gifts I gave you tasteless and showy. You said you were just playing nice until you could afford to move closer to Layla." She paused, breathing in. "You didn't just say those things, you meant them, and you've been meaning them for a long, long time." The front door opened. Layla stepped in, confused, looking from one face to the next. "What's going on?" "I asked her to come," Marley said. "What is this?" Layla asked, brow furrowed. "Why do you look like you're in court?" Marley handed her a copy of the spreadsheet. "Because in a way we are." Layla read in silence, her fingers shaking slightly. Her eyes stopped on the line that read college savings, Layla's children, $30,000. "You." What Layla's voice was barely above a whisper. "You've been paying for their college funds," Marley nodded. "Every month. Quietly. Anonymously. Because I wanted to help." And because Mom and Dad told you it was them. Layla turned to Ellen and Raymond. Why? Ellen spoke first. We didn't want to embarrass you, dear. You were already struggling. No, Layla snapped. You didn't want me to know who was really holding us all up. She looked back at Marley, her voice softening. You never said anything. I didn't want to make you feel like you owed me, Marley said. But I'm done protecting people who'd never protect me. Raymond stood up. This is ridiculous. You're pitting the family against each other. No, Marley replied. You did that. Long before this moment. Ellen's voice cracked. Where will we go, Marley? We have no savings, no plan. You had 3 years, Marley said. 3 years of me giving, and you taking. Her eyes burned. I thought if I was generous enough, patient enough, maybe someday you'd say, we're proud of you. But I get it now. I wasn't the daughter you wanted, I was just the one who paid the bills. Raymond's voice rose. You think this makes you noble? No, Marley said. It makes me tired, and finally free. Layla stepped forward, standing beside her sister. They lied to me too, Marley. I didn't know. I wish I had. I know, Marley said softly. That's why I invited you. Not to choose sides, just to see. Raymond looked at both daughters as if they were strangers. So that's it, you sell the house, you throw us out and walk away like some hero? No, Marley said. I walk away like someone who has nothing left to give. She picked up her bag and turned toward the door. Layla followed, stopping just short of the threshold. You were always the strong one, Layla whispered. I see that now. I wish I'd seen it sooner. It's okay, Marley said. We were both trying to survive in different ways. Behind them, their parents sat in stunned silence. It wasn't rage Marley felt, it was something quieter. The sound of a door closing and finally the beginning of her own story. The morning Marley moved out, the sky was overcast, soft gray clouds stretching across the horizon like held breath. It didn't rain, but the air felt swollen with something unspoken. A pause, a stillness. The kind that comes before a moment that changes everything. She didn't wake up in her old room. She hadn't slept there in over a week. The guest room at Cassie's apartment had become her temporary refuge, quiet, gentle, without expectations. It was the first space in years where she didn't feel watched, judged, or owed. It had become something sacred hers, and today she was ready to take that sacredness with her. She parked across the street from the house, not her driveway anymore. It still looked the same. The wreath she had put up last holiday hung crooked on the door, the garden slightly overgrown where her father had stopped trimming. Nothing dramatic had changed. But everything had. Marley stepped out of her car, shoulders square, dressed in a simple wool coat that hugged her like armor. She didn't need to knock. The key still worked. As the lock clicked open for the last time, she felt a strange echo in her chest. Not sadness, not fear, just finality. Inside, the air was stale. Her parents had already begun to pack. Boxes sat open in corners filled with knickknacks she'd bought for them over the years, framed photos, throw pillows, the crockpot she'd researched and ordered because her mother liked slow-cooked Sunday meals. They hadn't even wrapped them in newspaper. Raymond and Ellen were in the kitchen. Her father leaned against the counter, arms crossed like always. Her mother sat at the table sipping coffee as if nothing was ending. Neither looked surprised to see her. You could have waited until after the holidays, Ellen said, not looking up. Marley didn't answer. She walked past them, heading for the hallway. Her steps echoed on the wood floor, each one quieter than the last. In her old bedroom, she paused. The walls were bare. The bed dismantled, her closet empty. She touched the window frame once, remembering the night she'd cried herself to sleep at 16 because her father hadn't come to her graduation ceremony. The next morning, she'd painted on a smile and said nothing. That had been the beginning of her silence. Today, she wouldn't say much either. Because this goodbye wasn't about explanations or justifications. It wasn't even about closure. It was about release. Back in the hallway, she found her mother standing near the door. Are you really going through with it? Ellen asked, voice tight with something between disbelief and resentment. I already did, Marley said quietly. You're abandoning your family. No, Marley said, her tone soft but firm. I'm choosing myself. Her father stepped forward angry. After everything we did for you, you didn't do it for me, Marley interrupted. Steady now. You did it for the version of me you could control. The one who stayed quiet. Who paid the bills. Who never asked why love had to be earned with sacrifice. Ellen's mouth twisted. We're your parents. That means something. It used to, Marley said. Until I realized I was the only one carrying that meaning. Layla arrived just as Marley carried her final box to the car. She had brought her van to help. They'll be out tomorrow, she said softly, nodding toward the house. They're bringing their things to my place. Marley closed the trunk with both hands. That's between you and them now. They think you'll change your mind, Layla added. Marley smiled faintly. They can keep hoping. I'm not in that story anymore. Layla hesitated. I know I said it already, but thank you. For all the years I didn't see it. For everything you did that I never knew about. Marley looked at her. Thank you for seeing it now. The two sisters stood in the driveway. Around them the wind picked up slightly, lifting a few leaves from the ground. It wasn't cold, but it wasn't warm either. Transitional. Like them. I'll visit, Layla said again. With the kids, Denver's not that far. I'd like that, Marley said. And she meant it. She turned to the house one last time. Not to say goodbye, but to acknowledge the weight she had carried within those walls. The little girl who had waited for praise, the teenager who overachieved to be seen, the woman who paid for love with exhaustion. She didn't owe this place her tears. It had already taken too many. I bought this house, she whispered to herself, but I could never buy their love. And for the first time, she no longer wanted to. Inside her car, the dashboard lit up as she turned the key. Layla stepped back and gave a small wave. Marley returned it. Not with flourish, but with quiet certainty. As she pulled away from the curb, the house grew smaller in the rearview mirror. A structure of walls and windows like any other. No longer sacred, no longer hers. She didn't look back. Because this wasn't an escape. It was a beginning. A clean break. The first thing Marley noticed about her new apartment wasn't the size, it was the silence. Not the heavy kind she had grown up with, the kind filled with tension and things unsaid. This silence was different. It was kind. The space was small, just over 700 square feet. A kitchen that opened into a modest living room, one bedroom, and a balcony that overlooked a line of sycamore trees. There were still boxes to unpack, but she didn't rush. For the first time in years, nothing felt urgent. There was no one to prove anything to. She slept on the floor her first night, wrapped in a thick throw blanket, her head resting on a pillow that still smelled faintly of lavender from Cassie's guest room. Her mattress was scheduled to arrive the next day, but she didn't mind. The hardwood floor was unfamiliar, but it didn't creak with judgment. And when she closed her eyes, something strange happened. She didn't dream of the hallway. She didn't wake up gasping. She just slept. For the first time in what felt like decades, her body rested without bracing. In the mornings, she made coffee with both hands, no phone in one, no mental checklist spinning. She watered the one plant she had brought with her, a peace lily Cassie had gifted her as a symbol of new roots, and in the quiet afternoons, she explored her new neighborhood. Small bookstores. Parks with benches that overlooked ponds. A Vietnamese bakery that reminded her of her childhood nanny, the only adult who had ever listened without judgment. It was during one of these early days, carrying groceries up the narrow stairwell to her second-floor apartment, that she met Gabriel. He was tall, with kind eyes and a voice that didn't try to occupy too much space. He noticed her struggling with a bag of canned soup and reached for it but didn't insist. Mind if I help? He asked. She hesitated, then handed him the bag. Only if you promise not to judge my excessive bean collection. He grinned. We all have our things. I buy more notebooks than I can write in. He lived across the hall. Taught music theory at the local community college. He offered her a cup of chai tea that weekend, and she accepted reluctantly, curiously. They sat on his balcony, sipping tea, sharing small pieces of themselves like loose puzzle pieces that didn't need to fit just yet. He never asked about her past. And she never felt the need to explain. What she remembered most was how comfortable the silence between them was. Not charged, not performative, just breathable. One evening weeks later, she found herself sitting on her balcony long after the sun had set. The streetlights cast soft glows across the sidewalk, and from across the way Gabriel's window was lit golden and steady. Music drifted faintly through the air, something slow like a lullaby. Marley closed her eyes. This wasn't happiness, not exactly. It was something quieter, something steadier. A life beginning without announcement. The next morning she realized something. She had gone a full month without waking up in dread. She had gone a full month without apologizing for her own needs. She had gone a full month simply being. Healing, she realized, wasn't about forgetting the pain. It was about learning to live in a way where the pain no longer got the final word. When Gabriel asked if she wanted to join him and his friends for a hike the next weekend, she hesitated. Not because she didn't want to, but because for the first time she understood she had a choice. She could say yes. She could say no. And whichever she chose, she would still be whole. She said yes. Not to impress, not to distract. Just because she wanted to feel the sun on her skin and the crunch of gravel beneath her shoes. As they walked among tall pines and autumn leaves, Gabriel slowed his pace to match hers without asking. When she grew quiet, he didn't fill the silence with noise. He simply walked beside her, present but not possessive. When they reached a lookout point, she sat on a rock, wind tugging gently at her jacket. Gabriel sat a few feet away, sipping water, not watching her, but not avoiding her either. "I never really liked being looked at," Marley said suddenly. He turned his head. "Do you mind if I ask why?" She shrugged. Growing up, being looked at usually meant being judged. Meant someone was about to tell me who I was doing wrong. Gabriel nodded, taking it in. "Then I'll look when you want to be seen. And I'll look away when you need space." Marley blinked, surprised by how deeply those words landed. No grand declarations, no saving. Just respect, quiet and profound. Maybe love didn't have to arrive like thunder. Maybe it could slip in gently like sunlight through blinds you finally opened. That night, Marley fell asleep in her own bed, the mattress finally delivered, and sheets crisp with lavender fabric softener. The peace lily sat by the window. Gabriel's apartment was dark across the hall, but she knew he was there. She dreamed of trees and open skies. And not once, not even once, did her past come knocking. It arrived on a Thursday, one of those cool Denver mornings when the wind had a voice of its own. Marley was just returning from the local farmer's market, a paper bag tucked under one arm, her fingers slightly numb from the chill when she saw the envelope wedged into her mailbox. No return address, just her name. Inside, her mother's handwriting, elegant, unmistakable, curved across 3 pages of cream stationery. Marley read it slowly, standing by her kitchen window while the kettle boiled. "Marley, I know you don't want to hear from us. I know you think we were unfair, ungrateful. Maybe we were. But family is complicated. Family fights, disappoints, hurts, yes. But family is still family. We've been talking, your father and I. We miss you. We didn't know how much until you were gone. Please don't shut the door forever. Family is forever. Love, Mom." She read it twice. Then a third time. And something inside her stayed still. The words were soft, familiar, and yet they asked for forgiveness without accountability. They spoke of missing her but not of seeing her. Not once did the letter mention what was said. What was done. What had been expected of her until she collapsed under it. Family is forever. A phrase that had once made her ache with guilt now made her bristle with clarity. She folded the letter, tucked it into the drawer where she kept spare batteries and takeout menus, and poured herself a cup of tea. The next evening her phone rang. She almost didn't answer when she saw the caller ID home. She had never changed the name. Part habit. Part reluctance. She hesitated. Then picked up. "Marley," her father's voice came through, strained but even. "Your mother said you got the letter." "I did," she replied. There was a pause. Long enough to hurt. "So, how are you?" he asked, like it was a real question. "I'm fine," Marley said. "Busy. Settled." Another pause. "Then we were wondering if you might be able to help us out for a while. Things are a little tight. Layla's been covering more than expected." Marley closed her eyes. There it was. Not a conversation, not a reaching out, a transaction. "I can't," she said simply. Raymond's voice tensed. You won't, you mean? No, Marley said. I can't, and I won't. You're just going to turn your back on us. I didn't turn my back, Marley replied. I stepped away from something that was hurting me. But we're family, I know, she said. And family doesn't mean I owe you my peace of mind. Or my bank account. A beat. Fine, Raymond muttered. I guess that's who you are now. No, Marley said quietly. This is who I've always been. You're just seeing me clearly for the first time. She ended the call. Her hand trembled slightly, but not with regret. With release. 2 days later, Layla called. I heard what happened, she said without preamble. Dad was fuming. Said you cut them off. Marley didn't respond right away. I didn't call to ask you to change your mind, Layla continued. I called because I think I'm starting to feel it too. Feel what? Marley asked. The squeeze, Layla whispered. The way Mom drops hints, the guilt trips. The way every kindness they show me has a string tied to it. Marley's heart sank. I'm sorry. No, don't be, Layla said. It's not your fault. You just left earlier. I stayed and thought I was chosen. I thought that meant I was loved. But now. She trailed off. I feel like I'm holding up a house that isn't mine, and I'm breaking in the process. Marley breathed in slowly. You don't have to, she said. You're allowed to stop carrying them. But they're our parents. I know, Marley said. And that still doesn't make it right. Silence stretched between them this time, not empty but sacred. A space where understanding grew like light through a crack in stone. I don't want to lose myself, Layla finally whispered. You won't, Marley said. Not if you start choosing yourself. She heard Layla cry softly on the other end, no longer hiding it. And Marley let her. Sometimes love meant holding space for someone to unravel without trying to fix it. After they hung up, Marley walked to her window and stared out at the golden haze settling over the trees. The sun had started to set, turning the sky into soft fire. Behind her, the peace lilies swayed slightly in the draft. She thought about the letter. About the call. About the phrase, family is forever. And she realized something. Forever doesn't mean unchanging. It doesn't mean unquestioned loyalty. It doesn't mean pain disguised as duty. Forever to her now meant truth. Boundaries. Freedom. And love that didn't have to be begged for. The snow began falling in soft spirals just after sunset on Christmas Eve. Not in flurries or gusts, but in gentle, almost reverent waves, like the sky itself had decided to forgive the year. Marley watched from her apartment window, wrapped in a navy blue sweater Gabriel had given her for her birthday. It still smelled faintly of cedar and warmth. Below, the streetlights cast halos over quiet sidewalks. The world looked clean. Undisturbed. Beginning again. Inside, her apartment buzzed with mismatched voices and warmth. Cassie was trying to rescue a slightly burnt lasagna. Jonas and his partner were untangling a string of lights that neither worked nor matched. 2 of Marley's co-workers sat cross-legged on the floor laughing over a game of charades they hadn't finished because nobody could stop talking long enough to play. It was Marley's first Christmas without her family. But for the first time, she didn't feel alone. The living room was cluttered with plates that didn't match and ornaments that weren't part of any tradition except this new one built not from obligation but from choice. There was no big tree, just a tiny pine in a terracotta pot decorated with dried oranges and handmade stars. It looked like it belonged exactly where it was. So did she. Later in the evening, as the fire flickered low and the music shifted to jazz standards, Gabriel quietly pulled her aside. I wanted to give you this when it was quiet, he said, handing her a small palm-sized box wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. She untied it slowly, carefully. Inside was a worn brass compass. Not polished. Not pristine. The kind that had clearly been used, trusted. The kind passed down not for function but for meaning. She turned it over. Engraved on the back were 5 words, "You found your true north." Her breath caught. For a moment, the chatter in the background fell away. The weight of the compass in her hand felt like something more than metal. It felt like recognition. When she looked up, Gabriel wasn't watching her expectantly. He was simply there. Open, steady. No rush, no demand, no rescue. Just presence. And for the first time she realized that's what love might actually be. Not grand gestures or fixing broken things, but sitting beside someone who's healing and never asking them to hurry. She smiled. Thank you, Gabriel only nodded. You're the one who found it. As the party drifted into its quieter hour, people gathered near the fireplace with hot cider and peppermint cookies. Someone passed around paper crowns. Cassie made everyone go around and share what they were grateful for. It was cheesy and chaotic, but Marley joined in. When it was her turn, she paused. I'm grateful, she said slowly, for silence that doesn't hurt. For warmth that doesn't come with conditions. And for finding myself again, after losing parts I thought were gone forever. Her voice didn't shake. And no one clapped. But the room grew a little softer, like it was listening with its whole body. Later, while clearing plates, her phone buzzed on the counter. Mom and Dad, incoming call. She stared at the screen. Time slowed. The room around her was still full, people laughing, the fire crackling, Cassie humming while organizing leftovers. Gabriel leaning against the counter with a mug of tea. Her tiny pine tree glowing in the corner. She looked back at the screen. Her hand didn't tremble. Her chest didn't tighten. The voices in her head that once begged her to pick up had fallen silent. She reached out and pressed the side button. The ringing stopped. She placed the phone face down on the counter next to a plate of half-eaten cookies. She didn't owe anyone an explanation. That decision didn't come from anger. It came from clarity. Cassie appeared beside her, nudging her shoulder with a grin. I burned the dessert. Again. Marley laughed genuinely. Perfect. Gabriel handed her a mug, to burnt desserts and better boundaries. She raised it. And to chosen families. The snow was still falling outside. The street below blanketed in white, softening the hard edges of the city. She walked to the window again and watched it settle. Each flake a quiet affirmation, things can end and still be beautiful. Later that night, when everyone had left and the apartment had returned to a hush, she stepped out onto her balcony. She wrapped a woolen blanket around her shoulders and held the compass in one hand. The cold didn't bite. It reminded her she was awake. Alive. She reached for her phone again. Not to answer, not to call, but to delete. She opened her contacts, scrolled to home, stared at the name, then tapped delete contact. When the screen went blank, she smiled. She opened her notes app and typed, I didn't lose a family. I found myself. Marley, year 1. She saved it. And for the first time in her life, Marley didn't need anyone's permission to feel whole.